Influence begins in the hush before any word is spoken. The fraction of a second when another human soul scans your face, weighs your intent, and silently asks, "Will you see me?" That heartbeat decides negotiations, friendships, marriages, kingdoms. Inside that pause lies the power to calm boardrooms, revive tired dreams, or ignite revolutions. And so listen to the thunder beneath the silencer, names waiting to be cherished, hopes begging for witness, and inner wars disguised as polite smiles. Remember, Dale Carnegie warned us that a person's own name is, to that person, and the sweetest sound in any language, and the world is starving to hear it echoed back with sincerity, tonight. And in this cavern of dark and light where only a single voice reaches you, I will place that power in your hands, and temper it in the forge of story and steel, and command you to strike while the metal is still bright with possibilities. Mindset is the flint. Abraham Lincoln, drowning in the smoke of Civil War, drafted a blistering letter to his undisciplined General George Meade, then folded it, sealed it, and never mailed it. Why? Because Lincoln understood that greatness begins not by conquering enemies, but by mastering the inner battlefield, where reckless words become shrapnel. He chose curiosity over rage, asking, "What unseen burden drives this man to stumble?" That single reframed question saved a friendship, preserved a command structure, and shifted the momentum of history. Carnegie called it genuine interest, and the unshakable decision to study motives instead of judging mistakes. In our century, and Satya Nadella stood at the helm of a slug Microsoft and declared empathy the new operating system. He didn't swap code first. Well, he swapped mindset. I'm teaching coders to lean into customers' frustrations until bugs became opportunities and updates became love letters. Influence always germinates in the fertile soil of curiosity. Belief is the spark that meets the flint. The steel titan Charles M. Schwab once walked the blistering floors of his mills not with orders, but with awe. He singled out a young worker, eyes blackened by soot, and praised the gleam on a single rivet. Pay rose that day, but morale soared for months. And Schwab believed unwaveringly that people grow toward the light of appreciation, and that belief multiplied through every foreman. And Carnegie told us you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in others than in 2 years by trying to make them interested in you. Because when you believe in their potential, and they begin to believe in yours. Modern creators on TikTok have hacked the same algorithm of the human heart, and they mouth the viewer's secret fears, reply to comments by name, and turn millions of strangers into intimate allies overnight. Conviction broadcast with empathy becomes a magnet the size of continents. Clarity and vision shape the flame. Picture Andrew Carnegie sketching a lattice of railroads stretching west like arteries of steel, pumping opportunity into towns that were still dust on the horizon. He saw not just tracks, but schools, libraries, and dinner tables warmed by fresh wages. Influence without vision is a match in the wind. With vision, it becomes a lighthouse. So distill your dream until it fits in a single breath. Ask, if every door were open, what world would my actions paint? Netflix answered with radical transparency, not merely to entertain, but to build a culture where feedback is oxygen. Clarity sharpened each critique, and turning awkward conversations into surgical precision. On the micro screen of the modern mind, people follow leaders who can clean stroke us one promise boldly declared, insistently repeated, relentlessly pursued. Purpose feeds the flame with oxygen. When you know why you rise, even hellish Mondays bow before you. Think of the nurse who whispers each patient's name like a covenant, or the teacher who stays late to etch confidence into a stuttering child. Purpose transforms routine into ritual. Write yours in ink that never dries, on mirrors, on dashboards, on the inside of your eyelids as you sleep. Carnegie warned us. And people crave meaning as lungs crave air. Make your purpose a draft they cannot resist inhaling. An A salesperson becomes a liberator of dreams. A coder becomes an architect of freedom. A parent becomes a sculptor of futures. And purpose is the siren song that rallies lies long after the novelty fades. Discipline and action strike the anvil. Act enthusiastic and you will be enthusiastic, Carnegie insisted. And science has since traced that mantra through neural pathways. Motion rewires emotion. So rise before the doubt can speak. Write the thank you note. Dial the reluctant call. Practice the name you will pronounce flawlessly at dawn. Influence is a verb disguised as a noun. It only exists while you wield it. Think of Martin Luther King Jr., rewriting speeches until sunrise, or athletes rehearsing victory in frost-bitten stadiums. Winners are not gifted extra hours, and they ignite ordinary hours with extraordinary resolve. Build micro rituals, 3 daily compliments, 1 handwritten card, and 5 minutes of silent praise for unseen labor. Over time, these sparks weld chains of loyalty stronger than contracts. Resilience and adaptability temper the blade. The market crashes, the algorithm mutates, and the friend misreads your silence, and the furnace roars in you. Steel that will not bow in crisis was folded 1,000 times in practice. A Lincoln's unused letter became a private anvil where anger cooled into wisdom. When Netflix abandoned DVDs, the pundits prophesied collapse. Instead, the company streamed its own rebirth. Microsoft, mocked for missing mobile, now rules the cloud. An influence that survives merely sunny weather is counterfeit. Train yourself to pivot with grace, brave before reacting, and question before condemning, experiment before surrendering. Adversity is not a detour. It is the toll gate that authentic influence must pay to earn passage. Learning and growth grind the edge. We live in an era where ignorance is a choice. Knowledge arrives in pockets before sunrise. Yet information without reflection is noise. Schedule solitude the way emperors scheduled wars, deliberately, strategically, or with full armies of questions. What assumption died today? Which rival could teach me mastery? A Carnegie filled scrapbooks with speeches he admired, dissecting syntax like a surgeon. And TikTok venoms replay their own clips at half speed, hunting micro ticks that drain charisma. And Satya Nadella reads poetry to decode human longing. When you greet each dawn as an apprentice, and the universe hands you new keys, doors others no longer sees. Gratitude and fulfillment polish the blade until it mirrors the sky. Genuine thanks is not a ribbon atop success. It is the currency that buys tomorrow's allies. A picture Schwab returning to the mills with pockets of silver dollars, tossing them not to executives, but to janitors whose clean floors prevented accidents. He wasn't purchasing labor, he was investing in dignity, and dividends poured back as zeal. And keep a private ledger of blessings paid forward mentor a stranger, sight unseen contributors by name, and celebrate defeats that taught precision. Ungratitude circles back as influence, because people remember the hand that lifted them when applause was nowhere in sight. And now the climax, the cracking of the black screen into blinding dawn. Move. Speak that forgotten name tonight. Send the message that begins with honest wonder, not selfish pitch. Walk the factory floor, the office easel, the family hallway, and let your eyes declare, I see you, I value you, and then together we will carve mountains. Write the unsent letter, but this time mail the praise and burn the blame. Interest, and genuine and fierce, is the spark that can set a century ablaze. The moment you wield it, empires bend like grass. So stand right now, and feet square with destiny, and act enthusiastic until every cell believes the anthem. And influence begins with genuine interest. Start now, and history will start counting from this breath. Pause, and feel the weight of that command settle into your bones. And the great illusion of influence is that it requires permission, a higher title, a larger platform, as some ceremonial passing of the torch. Nonsense. The torch is already burning in your grasp, and the only question is whether you will raise it high enough to light another face. And Carnegie did not wait to be crowned a sage before he changed the weather in every room, and he simply began pronouncing names like blessings. You can do the same, beginning with the ones carved into your phone, and half buried under endless scrolling. Speak them aloud tonight, as though each syllable were a rescued treasure. I watch how the tempo of conversation shifts when you pronounce a barista's name with crisp certainty, or greet the security guard you've ignored for 3 years. Every soul blooms at its own proper music, and their name is the first note. Do not underestimate how quickly genuine attention rearranges the geometry of a moment. Picture a crowded subway at dawn, rows of commuters draped in gray silence, eyes glassed over by glowing rectangles. Then imagine one passenger leaning forward, earphones dangling, to say, I noticed you sketch every morning. Your lines have a kind of restless kindness. Have you ever shown your work in a gallery? Instantly, an invisible ripple travels the carriage. Shoulders straighten, screens dim, and the artist's pupils widen into nova. And that single compliment has cracked open a sealed universe. Everyone else becomes, for a heartbeat, an accomplice to wonder. And the initiator may never see those people again, yet each will arrive at work subtly altered, inclined to kindness, and a prime for creativity, because someone dared to be interested. And what Carnegie distilled in boardrooms is no less potent under flickering fluorescent lights or in pixelated comment threads. And now breathe in the long lineage of those who built empires from attentive listening. A Florence Nightingale defied the British War Office not with guns but with clipboards and unconditional regard for soldiers who had been reduced to statistics. And she taught armies to whisper wounded men's names, to document their agonies with meticulous care, and to respect their humanity as fervently as their discipline. Mortality rates fell, yes, but more profoundly, morale soared. And an era learned that management of any kind begins with compassionate inventory. And a fast forward to modern hospitals where whiteboards above each play the patient's preferred nicknames. Recovery accelerates when identity is honored. Antibiotics work better beside empathy. You, too, can prescribe recognition like medicine. No license required. There is a science beneath the poetry. Neuroscientists have traced the sweet electric bloom that fires in the brain when one's name is spoken. Dopamine surges, defensive cortices relax, mirror neurons begin their silent dance. In that state, persuasion travels like a current through water. You need not be a biochemist to feel it, or recall the thrill when a childhood hero signed a book, To Sarah or To Jamal. A single pen transformed anonymous ink into a keepsake worthy of glass cases. Carry that alchemy into every email. Type a name at the top, not a call but his proclamation, I see you. Ironically, in the age of automated placeholders, PRS2 NAMI sprayed across endless newsletters. The rare human who writes a name by hand wields the power of a conjurer. Become that rarity. If mindset lit the flame and belief sparked it bright, then clarity and vision now demand scaffolding tall enough to climb the night, and sharpen your lens until the horizon cracks into measurable steps. Say, in 12 months I will command a team that thrives on radical candor, because candor is the language of respect. Or, by next spring our nonprofit will place 10,000 books in the hands of children who have never owned a story. Paint it so vividly the brain mistakes the future for a sense memory. Carnegie carried pocket cards where he scrawled goals like, earn now 50,000 a year, back when such figures sounded mythic. This wasn't vanity, but a compass that refused to spin, when each day's decisions threatened to scatter him, and that card anchored his trajectories. Purpose tightens every bolt on that scaffold. Consider the janitor at NASA who, when asked what he did, replied, I'm helping send a man to the moon. He mopped floors with the ferocity of a launch engineer because his purpose eclipsed his task. Find that scope for yourself, then hand it to others until their hearts thrum in unison. Purpose is the great equalizer, and it transfigures mundane schedules into heroic sagas. And let the teenager stocking shelves know she is not shifting inventory, but orchestrating convenience for hurried parents. And tell your finance intern he is not crunching numbers, but translating dreams into viable budgets. When you infuse purpose, you upgrade job descriptions into origin stories. Discipline chisels the vision into granite. Build rituals that torque imagination into momentum. Rise before dawn not as martyrdom, but as a rendezvous with possibility. I write 5 lines of appreciation before your first sip of coffee. Reply to difficult emails within 1 hour, as sealing each with a personal insight gleaned from the recipient's public profile. This is not time management. It is influence management. The world answers discipline with compounded trust. And Charles I steelworkers once discovered him inspecting furnaces past midnight, and his presence was not surveillance but solidarity, proof that leadership never clocks out. Your late night rehearsal, and your weekend strategy sketch. These silent acts become folklore others recite when you're absent. Influence grows most vigorously in shadows where effort outpaces applause. Still, every flame meets wind. Resilience is the art of bending oxygen into further heat rather than snuff. Remember the unsent letter in Lincoln's drawer, a monument to restraint stronger than any cannon. Craft your own ritual of pause, maybe a cold glass of water held until anger settles, or a slow walk around the block during which you ask, what would their mother say of them right now? Resilience is not tension, it is fluidity. The bamboo survives typhoons by bowing, then snapping upright as the clouds depart. Likewise, a Netflix survived its DVD chrysalis because Reed Hastings mourned the death of discs and rehearsed the streaming funeral until grief birthed innovation. Mourn your current identities. Celebrate its achievements, then bury them with honor, making space for the self that tomorrow requires. Learning sharpens the sword anew each dawn. And dedicate at least 1 hour a day to reading outside your echo chamber, biographies of dissenters, journals from distant centuries, and code written in languages you do not yet speak. Curate a circle of honest critics, reward them lavishly for brutal accuracy. And Carnegie traveled with stenographers, capturing audience questions to dissect patterns of confusion. And TikTok virtuoso scroll comments not for praise but for micro flaws in pacing. Adopt that forensic curiosity. The algorithm of excellence demands continuous data. Feed it. Finally, gratitude seals the cycle, fortifying the vessel for another voyage. Cultivate surprise thank use. Handwritten notes to bureaucrats who processed your permit. Voice messages to mentors at 3 a.m. Their time, scheduled to arrive at sunrise. Stock your desk with silver dollar equivalents. Symbolic tokens you can drop into palms as tangible proof of appreciation. Neuroscience affirms what Carnegie intoted, and gratitude floods the giver with serotonin, reinforcing generous behavior until it becomes reflex. An influential life is not upstream battle but a self-propelling river of goodwill. And still, for many, the gap between knowledge and deed yawns like a canyon. You have heard these truths. Perhaps you have underlined them in borrowed books. Yet the pen has not touched your own life. So permit me one final lightning strike of clarity. Influence is perishable. and the opportunity before you, this colleague bruised by criticism, this sibling drifting into silence, and this audience waiting behind a glowing rectangle, will not ripen indefinitely. Interest delayed curdles into regret. And when Andrew Carnegie stood on a factory catwalk in Pittsburgh and complimented a tired worker's shiny shoes, and he could not have known that man would become a foreman who later optimized furnace output by 15%, saving millions. Complimenting tomorrow would have been too late, the shoes would be scuffed, the spirit already dulled. Likewise, the message you postpone tonight may never find its mark, so act with unfiltered audacity, and close this screen if you must and lift the phone. Begin with the words, "I've been thinking about something you said," or "Your work on that proposal caught my eye." Let sincerity tumble out imperfectly, and eloquence will arrive late to the party and claim credit, but authenticity throws the first confettis. Do not fear stumbling. Carnegie himself confessed that his first speeches were marred by frozen hands and broken sentences. Courage is simply curiosity that ignores the tremor of nerves. Tomorrow, escalate. Learn 3 new names before lunch. Spell them backward, test them in a whispered rehearsal, and greet their owners with the confidence of old allies. Compliment with granularity. Not "great job," but "the way you wove data into that story held the room hostage." Granularity proves attention, and attention validates existence. Stack these moments like bricks. Soon you will inhabit a cathedral of trust. And remember, while titles may grant authority, only interest grants influence. A CEO can command attendance, but never engagement. A teacher can assign pages, but cannot assign wonders. That power is earned in the crucible of eye contact, in the battlefield of personalized questions, in the sanctuary of names. Raise the torch. Flood the dark. Start now. Slip into the vantage point of tomorrow morning and watch yourself moving through the world as an architect of small wonders. See how the air around you shifts, almost imperceptibly, because people feel notice. And notice how the receptionist posture straightens when you greet her with her full name, a warm syllable by syllable, sound waves carving a space for her humanity amid the clatter of ringing phones. Hear how the delivery driver, usually a ghost in the corridors of commerce, and suddenly volunteers a joke about his toddler's fascination with cardboard boxes. That joke becomes an ember of connection you later fan into loyalty when you rewrote a last-minute shipment through his company instead of a cheaper rival. And the influence and action effortless, reciprocal, tangibles. Follow the ripple farther. At midday, you chair a meeting once mired in polite inertia. Yet something is different. You open by washing the room in gratitude, citing exact contributions. Maria, and your pivot table exposed an anomaly in our cost forecast. Trevor, and your storyboard turned abstract policy into a visceral journey for the client. Eyes reflect light you didn't install, and shoulders square. Smartphones descend onto desk face down because you have already fed the basic human hunger to be acknowledged. The conversation becomes electric. Ideas volley faster than your pen can capture them. But you record names beside each concept because accountability is the highest form of respect. Afterward, and someone you barely noticed before lingers at the door, cheeks lit with purpose, and says, "No one has ever called out my data work like that, and I'm ready to tackle the South Asia market if you need volunteers." You just unlocked hidden reserves of energy by paying the cost of attention. Evening casts long shadows across city streets peppered with strangers, but influence is never off duty. You hold the elevator for an elderly neighbor. Introduce yourself, and ask how she pronounces her surname. The act alone bridges decades of isolation. And she confesses her husband passed last winter, and she cannot lift the grocery boxes left in the lobby. You cancel the silent race to the top floor, tote her parcels, and listen to the stories embedded in her frame photographs. And she teaches you that the scraper across town once hosted secret swing dance gatherings during the war. Suddenly, and your neon jungle gains a layer of magic you'll share with colleagues tomorrow. That is the compound interest of genuine curiosity, and every time you invest, the world deposits dividends of wonders. Momentum grows. Days congeal into weeks, and the habit of precise appreciation rewires your default settings. Neural pathways primed for skepticism reroute toward discovery. You awaken scanning your calendar not for threats to manage, but for people to elevate. And when conflict arises, a vendor's late shipment jeopardizing a product launch, you resist the tribal urge to name a villain. Instead, you schedule a video call, open with the sentence, "And walk me through what pressures you're facing that I can't see from my vantage point." And watch defensiveness evaporate, and you uncover that a flocked out their regional hub, forcing them onto emergency logistics. Rather than penalize, you collaborate on a contingency plan. Weeks later, the vendor repays the grace fast, tracking a crucial part no other supplier could source. One influence again proves mutually reinforcing. Interest given returns as favor earned. As your orbit of impact widens, adversaries emerge. Not everyone will applaud your ascent. Some will misinterpret kind as manipulation, confuse confidence with threat, or simply resent change. Meet them with Lincoln doctrine of unsung letters. Draft your frustration in full candor. Password, protect the file. Bury it on a private drive and do not send. The exercise will bleed excess emotion without sparking conflagration. And then craft a second message, surgical and curious, that you do send 3 questions probing root causes, and 2 statements validating their perspective, 1 clear articulation of shared goals. You will be amazed how often that formula melts stone hearts. When it fails, you still retain moral high ground and mental clarity, liberated from the toxicity of unfiltered resentment. Beyond interpersonal dynamics, you'll confront systemic inertia, entrenched policies groaning under their own weight, of processes calcified by, we've always done it this way. Here, your tool is story. Like Carnegie wielded anecdotes like battering rams against the fortress of rigidity. You must do likewise. Collect narratives of transformation, stitch them with data, and catapult them into boardrooms unwilling to risk unfamiliarity. And show how a Japanese automaker empowered assembly line workers to halt production if quality slipped, slashing defects by 90%. And illustrate how a small Ghanaian cocoa cooperative yield doubled after leaders visited farmers by name. And praising each plot for unique strengths rather than issuing blanket edicts. Embed living humans into the bones of spreadsheets. And watch policy architects finally feel the pulse behind the numbers. Remember, though, that every expanding sphere has a gravitational threshold. If you don't balance outward focus with inner calibration, burnout lies in ambush. Schedule solitude as rigorously as meetings. And Carnegie spent hours each Sunday walking in silence through Central Park, rehearsing speeches to the trees, raking through weekly interactions for splinters of misunderstanding. You might practice a modern variant, a sunrise jog minus earbuds, and letting city birds critique your week in song, or a nightly digital sunset, powering down screens to write 3 lessons learned, and 3 names you will champion tomorrow. And these rituals sharpen the saw, keep enthusiasm renewable, and anchor influence to authenticity rather than performance. As months pass, your reputation metabolizes into legend. Clients confide that they feel seen, in a way no competitor offers. Team members mimic your practices, opening Slack threads with personalized kudos, prefacing slide decks with 5-second gratitude bursts, and an external auditor notes an unprecedented dip in voluntary turnover and asks for your retention blueprint. You realize the blueprint is invisible. It exists in how you pronounce names, validate ideas, and transmute mistakes into laboratories instead of crime scenes. And the culture has re-skinned itself in empathy because you persisted long enough to let compounding interest work its quiet arithmetic. Then arrives the keynote moment, the invitation to address a gathering far beyond your usual audience, perhaps a tech giant's global summit, a humanitarian forum, or a commencement ceremony beneath fluttering banners. Standing backstage, you feel the ancient tremor, the primal fear that you are still the awkward child fumbling speeches before imaginary mirrors. Holster it with Carnegie's antidote. Act enthusiastic and you will be enthusiastic. Breathe diaphragmatically, visualize each listener as a beneficiary rather than a judge. Step into the spotlight and begin not with statistics, but with a luminous story of personal connection. Maybe the elderly neighbor's wartime swing dances and how they taught you nostalgia can fuel innovation. Laid them through mindset, belief, clarity, purpose, discipline, resilience, learning, and gratitude, but laced with your own scars and victories. Watch as thousands lean forward. Not because your slides shimmer, because your sincerity does. When thunderous applause escorts you offstage, resist the vanity trap. Head straight to the service corridor. Locate the crew hauling cables and thank them by name, perhaps gleaned from tag badges glimpsed earlier. Your legacy is forged in those micro moments, offering water to the exhausted translator, asking the lighting engineer which gel color is her signature choice. Such gestures plant your myth in unexpected soil. One day, a future decision maker will recall that you, unlike most headliners, stayed to full chairs. And an opportunity will swing open without warnings. Influence, sustainable and seismic, now pulses through your life like an underground river. But rivers unchanneled may flood. At this stage you must mentor the next custodian of genuine interest. Identify prodigies with hungry eyes and quiet empathy. And teach them the names of stakeholders, the history of past failures, the art of praising with specificity. Hand them low-risk arenas to practice it, leading brainstorming sessions, negotiating small contracts, diffusing minor conflicts. Debrief afterward with forensic precision. Celebrate what glowed, dissect what lagged, prescribe next replications. By multiplying practitioners, you convert influence from personal brand to institutional DNA. That is the point at which movements outlive founders. And still, vigilance remains. The world spins faster, new platforms crisis, and cultures erupt. Your curiosity must outrun complacency. Subscribe to newsletters from fields alien to your own. Quantum computing, regenerative agriculture, Afrofuturist literature. Attend webinars where you are the most ignorant person present, and ask the humbling beginner's questions. How might this discipline reimagine human connection? Because cross-pollination is the oxygen of enduring wit. It allows you to greet each emergent generation. Gen Z today, Gen Alpha tomorrow. Not with patronizing nostalgia, but with agile relevance. One evening, perhaps a decade hence, you'll encounter a stranger at an airport bookstore who recognizes your name on a spine. And she'll say she watched that early keynote in college and built a refugee integration startup inspired by your line. Interest delayed curdles into regret. She'll reveal that her organization now greets each arriving family with volunteers trained to pronounce their names perfectly. And even when the phoneme's not Western tongues, survival rates and employment rates have doubled. Tears might prick your eyes, not out of pride, but out of the realization that the echo chamber of genuine interest can, indeed, reverberate across continents and generations. You will thank her, and she will thank you. And then both thanks will eddy into the infinite audit of meaningful lives. And yet even then, the journey is not done. Influence is both gift and obligation. For every triumph, and there is a silent hallway where a name still waits to be spoken, a criticism still festers in a draft unsent. A young voice still trembles unseen on the margins of a Zoom call. Every sunrise resets the meter. So tomorrow you rise once more, and sharpen the practice inu, and walk into the world armed with the most understated weapon ever forged: sincere, undivided attention. Let this be the covenant you recite as final mantra. I will see before I seek to be seen. I will hear before I hope to be heard. I will honor names, sculpt enthusiasm, champion purpose, and transmute setbacks into blueprints. I will learn with voracious humility and give thanks until gratitude saturates the walls of every room I enter. By these acts, I will multiply influence until its glow touches corners I may never visit, souls I may never meet, futures I may never inhabit. And when history audits my ledger, may it find that I invested my fleeting breath in the richest currency of all, and genuine interest paid forward without expirations. Now close this narrative capsule and step into living daylight. The next name awaits your voice. The next thread of destiny awaits your tug. Raise the torch higher than yesterday, for the hourglass bleeds onward, and the world, as ever, is starved to be seen. Start now.